Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another episode of Little Modular. This is this year's last episode in which I will take a look at those three piggies from Tiptop Audio. What we have here is three different effects. I won't describe all of them in this video, but I will describe how they work, and that's because they all work the same. They have the same core, the same parameters, and the same philosophy of usage. So I'll describe how you use them, and once you know how to use one of them, you know how to use all of them. So we have three units, each of them focusing on a bit different area of effects. ECHOZ, obviously, it's a take on different kinds of ECHOZ delays. Z5000, it's more of a chameleon and many different effects, different flavors in one unit. And then we have the ZVERB, which, as the name implies, focuses on reverbs. Now, as you might have noticed on the left, I have the big Papa Bear, the Tiptop ZDSP. So the first question you might have is the one that I had. What's the difference here? All of these effects share the same sound DNA because they are based on the same chip, which is FV1. It's an old chip, but it doesn't matter because it sounds great, even to the newest and flashiest offerings of some other platforms. The engine is the same. How about the algorithms? Well, this is a mixture of some old algorithms that were developed for the ZDSP for those nifty cards, but there are also some new algorithms in here, but the sound is the same. What are the differences? The most obvious one is the size. I'm not sure if you can see it, but those three take less HP than this one. I think it's about 4 HP bigger than those three. So if you want to go live, obviously that wouldn't be your first choice because it takes a lot of space. So the idea behind those was slim it down, pack it with the most useful algorithms, and make it simple. So we don't have all of the features of the ZDSP, but we have the core functionality. Well, you don't have the cards like on the ZDSP. You have fixed set of algorithms, which are 24, housed in 3 different banks, bank 1, 2, and 3. So 8 algorithms in each bank. You can't exchange them, but they are really, really well picked and are more than enough for each of the departments here. So it's well suited for live performance, because when you play live, you don't want to have limitless options. You just take the ones that you need. You won't have things like modulation of the mix. You won't have the analog feedback patch here. You won't be able to switch the presets with the CV signal like you could do on the ZDSP. But there's one function I'm super grateful for, and this is the fidelity parameter and the fidelity socket, which is equivalent to the clock input on the ZDSP, which allows you to hack the internal chip processor clocking with either a built-in VCO or external signal that you plug in here. And that is the one function I totally love about ZDSP, and that's why it is my favorite effects of them all. So you do have that on all 3 of them, and that is really, really great. I will show you around on the ECHOZ, and all I say about it also applies to the other 2 effects. That's where you have your 3 banks and preset management. So if you want to choose a bank, you just press and hold it. So I have just chosen the tape bank. Again, if I want to choose the pitch, I just press and hold it, and I chose it. Now, if I want to choose a preset from that bank, I would just press that button again shortly. And it does not have a digital display, which got me a bit worried at first. But since you only have 8 effects, it's really easy to remember the LED configuration, because the LED configuration, which disappears after 5 seconds, tells you what preset you are on. So if you press it, all 3 LEDs red mean you're on 1, then you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, it's all LEDs yellow. If you press it again, you're back to number 1, which is 8. It's not that hard. After a few hours you will get accustomed to it, and you will recognize which preset is what. Furthermore, when you choose a preset, it is remembered for that bank. So let's say, for instance, if I like preset number 1 here, and then I choose the bank number 2, and now if I go back to bank number 3, it will remember the last chosen preset, which is very cool. There's also a second view mode, which is more minimalistic. It won't show you those combos. It will just show you all yellow LEDs for all the presets except the preset number 1, which will be red. Also, when you load a different bank in this mode, it will not remember the lastly chosen preset. It will just load the first preset from the bank. And you switch between those modes holding either the middle or the right button while powering up. Then we have the 4 knobs which are responsible for effect tweaking. So on all 3 of the modules we have the time. In case of ECHOZ, this is the time delay. In case of the reverb, this is the reverb's decay, and it does similar job on the Z5000. Filter depends on the algorithm again. It could be a low pass, high pass, or band pass depending on the program chosen, but most of the times it's a low pass filter, so brighter, darker. And then we have the 3rd knob, which is feedback on ECHOZ. Also it's feedback / modulation on the Z5000, and modulation of the reverb on the ZVERB. And then we have the fidelity I told you about. So we can really mangle any effect, make it super lo-fi, crunchy, grungy effect. And you can use the built-in VCO, but you can also use an external signal which you plug in here. And then you have this switch, which I simply adore. It's a small thing, call me crazy, but it's so inviting. I mean, normally you have those switches made of metal, and this is also metal, but it has this super nice, warm, and just inviting rubber coating, something like that. It just feels like you're hugging a puppy, and I just love that. Seriously. But what it does, it lets you decide on the purpose of this CV socket. So if it's in the upper position, you can use that as a modulation in for the time parameter. But if you switch it to the lower position, this becomes external signal for the fidelity circuit. So we can just plug in here a different oscillator and just mangle this to death. And there is a warning in the manual, just like with the ZDSP, that sometimes if you apply a negative voltage to the fidelity modulation, this might crash. Just like ZDSP, it can just go crazy and stop responding. In that case, you just unplug the modulation source and it should go back to a normal state. So you can't break anything with this socket, but you can discover some new sound universes. Then we have the filter, CV modulation, and also a feedback. So this parameter, similarly, we can modulate this and again this knob. And that's about it. One more word about the gain structure. Those effects were made to interface with external studio gear. So what's cool about it, it's really flexible, because if you set the in gain knob to the noon or maybe a little bit less, then at the output you will get about a line level out. So you can easily use that with your sound cards, mixers, and different studio effects without any need to convert from the modular signal to the studio signal. You are also having the clipping indicator in the middle on all 3 of them. So what I have here is a simple percussion loop. First we need to adjust the in level. Here we have the mix. I'll keep it around noon, 50%. And here we can choose the time, feedback. I'll open the filter. Okay, we can choose a wider time. And let's start with the tape. So I press and hold the tape. And it's always best to connect both of the channels, so left and right. So we have this really nice wide stereo effect. Okay. So some extreme feedback with some really short time. Now let's play with the fidelity. Super lo-fi. until you will only get this kind of aliasing and digital dust. Let's switch to a different algorithm. Now I can use an external signal and plug it into the fidelity. First I need to flick this sweet little switch to the lower position and apply some modulation signal into the fidelity, which in my case is a DPO oscillator. Okay. That is great. I can also use a typical LFO, like from my Modcon Quad LFO. In that case, I need to flick it up, and now I'm modulating the time parameter, as you can hear. And I can still use the fidelity, of course, with the internal VCO. So we can have the best of both worlds. ECHOZ, Z5000 and ZVERB. Super nice, beautifully designed, really flexible and straightforward effects that are just begging you to touch them, tweak it, and to warp your sounds beyond recognition. Alright. Nothing much more to say about it. As I mentioned before, I will focus on each of those modules in the next videos, so I'll show you around all of the algorithms in depth. But for now, that would be it. I have to go to my Christmas dinner, so you will have to excuse me. But before I go, let me just remind you that if you liked that video, if you found it useful, please like, subscribe, and spread the good word. I'll see you next time. Bye.